I grew up in a small town where everybody knew your name, your family, and your secrets. My childhood wasn't extraordinary, but it shaped me into the man I became. My parents were hardworking, my mother gentle and nurturing, my father strict and distant. From a young age, I dreamed of building a family that felt different, a home filled with laughter, warmth, and unconditional love. I wanted to give my children the kind of father I never had. I wasn't the smartest kid in class, but I learned early how to work hard. I got my first job at 15, stocking shelves in a corner store. Every paycheck, no matter how small, made me feel like I was one step closer to the life I wanted. I told myself that one day I'd find a woman who would stand by me, someone I could trust with my whole heart. Life has a way of giving you what you ask for in ways you never expect. I met Sarah in my early 20s. She was beautiful, in the kind of way that sneaks up on you. Not flashy, not loud, but graceful, with a smile that made the world slow down. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. Nothing special, just music, laughter, and too much cheap wine. I remember she spilled her drink and laughed at herself instead of being embarrassed. That laugh hooked me. We talked that night for hours, and the more she spoke, the more I felt like I had known her forever. She wasn't just someone I wanted. She was someone I felt I needed. She talked about her dreams, her fears, the kind of life she wanted, and it all sounded so much like mine. Dating her was like living in a dream. We went for long walks, spent lazy Sundays wrapped in blankets watching movies, and talked about everything under the sun. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, understood. I thought, this is it. This is the woman I will marry. And I did. Our wedding wasn't grand, but it was ours. Surrounded by friends, family, and laughter, I looked at her walking down the aisle in a simple white dress and thought I was the luckiest man alive. My best friend Mark stood beside me as my best man. He clapped me on the back, smiled, and said, "You've found a good one." I believed him. The first years of our marriage were simple but happy. We rented a small apartment, ate cheap takeout on the floor, argued about bills, and made up over late-night talks. I worked extra shifts. She picked up part-time jobs. And together, we started building a future brick by brick. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was enough. Then came the day that changed everything, the day my daughter was born. I still remember the smell of the hospital, the hum of machines, the sterile walls. But none of that mattered when the nurse placed that tiny bundle in my arms. She was so small, so fragile, but her presence filled every corner of my soul. I cried, unashamed, as I promised her that she would always know love, always know protection, always know the strength of a father's arms. That promise became my life's mission. Sarah looked at me that day with tears in her eyes, and for a moment I believed we were the perfect family. We brought her home, and our lives changed in the most beautiful way. Late nights, early mornings, sleepless hours filled with feeding, rocking, singing. I didn't mind. Every tired breath felt worth it when I saw her tiny fingers curl around mine. Mark visited often. He brought gifts, offered to babysit, made jokes about how she already had me wrapped around her finger. I laughed, never suspecting that one day the bond I cherished with him would become the source of my deepest wound. Those first years were a blur of joy and struggle. Money was tight, but love felt abundant. I worked long hours, sometimes 2 jobs, just to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. Sarah stayed home more, caring for our daughter, and I admired her strength. We weren't perfect, but we were together. That was all that mattered. Looking back now, I realize those were the golden years, the years I should have cherished even more. Because beneath the surface of our happy little family, shadows were forming. Shadows I was too blind, too trusting to see. As my daughter grew, so did my love for her. Every milestone etched itself into my memory. Her first word, the way she wobbled across the living room floor on unsteady legs, the way she clung to me when she was scared. These were the treasures of my life. I remember coming home after long shifts, exhausted and drained, only to have her run into my arms, shouting, "Daddy!" In that moment, all the stress of the day melted away. She gave my life meaning. I wasn't just working for myself or even for Sarah. I was working for her future. We celebrated birthdays with homemade cakes and balloons, Christmases with cheap but thoughtful gifts, summers filled with park visits, and ice cream cones dripping down our hands. It wasn't about how much money we had. It was about love, laughter, and togetherness. Sarah seemed happy too, though looking back, there were moments. Small, almost invisible cracks. Times when she would drift off in thought, when her eyes would cloud over, when her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I told myself it was just stress. Marriage isn't easy. Raising a child isn't easy. And we were both tired most of the time. I never imagined those cracks hid something far darker. Mark was there for everything. Birthdays, graduations, even random Tuesday dinners. He was the kind of friend who would show up with takeout when he knew I was working late, or step in to help fix a leaky faucet in our kitchen. He was family, and I trusted him with everything. He was the one person outside of Sarah I thought I could count on, without question. People used to joke that he was part of the family, that he should just move in already. I laughed, never knowing how close to the truth those words would one day feel. As my daughter grew older, I noticed things about her that made me smile, and others that made me pause. She had Sarah's grace, my stubbornness, but there were little details I couldn't quite place. Her smile, the tilt of her head, the way her laughter filled a room. Sometimes it reminded me of Mark. Once, at a family gathering, my aunt chuckled and said, "She looks so much like Mark when he was young." Isn't that funny? Everyone laughed, including me, but something in my chest tightened. I brushed it off, convinced myself it was just coincidence. Kids resemble all sorts of people, I told myself. Genetics are funny like that. But as the years went on, the comments didn't stop. A cousin said, "She's got Mark's eyes." A neighbor joked, if I didn't know better, I'd say she was his kid. Each time I laughed, but inside a seed of doubt grew. I hated myself for those thoughts. I loved my daughter with everything I had, and questioning her parentage felt like a betrayal of that love. I told myself I was being paranoid, insecure, unfair to Sarah. I buried the doubts so deep, I almost convinced myself they weren't there. But late at night, lying awake, while Sarah slept beside me, I couldn't silence the whispers in my head. What if? What if they're right? What if she isn't mine? I pushed those thoughts away with work, with fatherhood, with love. Because the truth is, I didn't want to know. I didn't want anything to threaten the family I had built, the bond I cherished, the life I had given everything for. Life went on. My daughter became a teenager, full of life and rebellion. We fought sometimes about curfews, grades, her friends, but beneath the arguments, our love remained unshakable. I was her father, and nothing could change that. Or so I thought. It was during those years that Sarah became more distant. She spent more time out with friends, more time on her phone, more time avoiding eye contact. I chalked it up to the strain of raising a teenager. Marriage goes through phases, I told myself. We'd find our way back. But then came the day everything changed. It started innocently. My daughter had a minor health issue. Nothing serious, just something that required some routine tests. The doctor suggested a genetic panel to rule out hereditary conditions. I agreed without hesitation. Anything for her health. When the results came in, I expected reassurance. Instead, I got devastation. The doctor sat me down, his voice calm but heavy. He explained that the results showed no genetic match between me and my daughter. At first, I didn't understand. I thought maybe there had been a mistake, a mix-up in the lab. I demanded another test, then another, but every result was the same. I wasn't her biological father. I remember holding that paper in my hands, the words swimming before my eyes, my chest tightening like a vice. 20 years of love, of sacrifice, of fatherhood, and in a single moment it felt like it had been ripped away. I drove home in a daze, the world outside my car a blur. I sat in the driveway for what felt like hours, unable to move, unable to breathe. How do you walk into your house knowing that everything inside it has been built on a lie? When I finally confronted Sarah, I prayed she would tell me it was a mistake, that there was some scientific error, that the test was wrong. But when I showed her the paper, her face crumbled. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and in that moment, I knew. She confessed. She told me it happened once, years ago, when we were going through a rough patch. She swore it meant nothing, that she had regretted it every day since. But when I asked who the father was, her silence was louder than any words. Finally, through sobs, she whispered the name I least expected, the name that shattered what was left of my world. Mark, my best friend, the man I trusted with my life, with my family, with my heart, the man who had been by my side for decades, the man I had called brother. It felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. Betrayal from my wife was one thing, but betrayal from both of them, the two people I trusted most, was unbearable. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make them feel the pain coursing through me. But all I could do was stare at her, my heart breaking, my hands trembling. That night, I realized the life I thought I had was gone forever. I sat in silence that night, staring at the woman I thought I knew. Sarah sobbed, begged for forgiveness, clutched at my arms as if her touch could erase the truth. But all I felt was cold, number, empty. Her words swirled in my head like poison, It was only once. It didn't mean anything. I was lonely. We were fighting. I made a mistake. But mistakes don't last 20 years. Mistakes don't become children. Mistakes don't sit across the dinner table every night, laughing, smiling, calling me dad. I asked her the question I dreaded most. Did Mark know? She froze. That silence, it told me everything. When I stormed out of the house, I didn't know where I was going. My fists clenched, my chest heaving. I drove through the night until I found myself parked outside Mark's place. The lights were on, like he had been waiting for me. Though maybe that was just my imagination feeding my rage. I pounded on his door. When he opened it, the look on his face told me he already knew why I was there. Don't, I growled before he could speak. Don't you dare say a word. But he did. He tried. He stammered excuses, words like mistake, drunk, regret. The same poison Sarah had spilled. You were my brother, I shouted, my voice cracking. You stood next to me at my wedding. You held my daughter in your arms. You smiled in my face every single day while you carried this secret. He tried to reach for me, but I shoved him back. My hands shook with the urge to hurt him, to make him feel just a fraction of what he had done to me. But I couldn't. Violence wouldn't fix this. Violence wouldn't give me back the last 20 years. So I left him there, standing in his doorway, his face pale, his lies dripping from his lips. I left because if I didn't, I might have done something I could never take back. Back home, Sarah was waiting, eyes red and swollen, clutching our daughter's childhood photo in her hands like it was a shield. She begged me to stay, begged me not to tear apart the family. But the family was already torn, wasn't it? It had been broken the moment she betrayed me, the moment Mark betrayed me. I couldn't sleep that night. Every memory replayed in my head like a cruel film. Mark holding my daughter's hand on our first day of school, Sarah smiling at him across the table, the way relatives joked about how much she looked like him. All the signs had been there. I had just been too blind, too trusting, too willing to believe in love and loyalty. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in our house grew unbearable. I barely spoke to Sarah. Every word between us was sharp, heavy, bitter. Our daughter noticed, of course. Children always notice, no matter how much you try to shield them. She asked me if we were okay, if we were still a family. I forced a smile I didn't feel and told her yes. But inside, I was drowning. Eventually, the truth couldn't stay hidden. Sarah broke down one night and told our daughter that the man she had called dad for her entire life wasn't her biological father. I will never forget the look in her eyes. Confusion, fear, pain, and worst of all, the question she asked me with tears streaming down her cheeks. Does that mean you're not my dad anymore? My heart shattered all over again. I pulled her into my arms, held her as tightly as I could, and told her the only truth that mattered. I am your father. Nothing will ever change that. Blood doesn't make a dad. Love does. She sobbed against my chest, and I knew in that moment that whatever else had been destroyed, my marriage, my friendship, my trust, I could not let this destroy her too. But the fallout was everywhere. Family members members whispered. Friends chose sides. Some said I should forgive. Others said I should walk away. Everyone had an opinion, but no one carried the weight of my pain except me. Mark tried to reach out, called me, showed up at my work. I ignored him, until one day I snapped and told him if he ever came near me or my family again, I'd forget every ounce of restraint I had left. He stayed away after that,